Welcome back, everybody. We're doing another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. Today's featured author is Ashley Grant. She's been on the program before, so if you are hearing her for the first time, you might want to go back, check the index, and find her other episodes. Welcome back, Ashley.
Thanks for having me back.
Anytime. Keep writing books. I'll keep having you back. That's how this game is played. Ashley comes from a New England military upbringing. She was born in Maine, and this lifestyle took her to many states throughout the U.S., gaining a love of horror from her father through Vincent Price movies such as Last Man on Earth. And this helped her to shape her author tendencies that she has today. Currently, she's residing in Virginia with her husband and their pets. Okay, first, before we get on to the whole writing thing, we need to touch on this whole pet thing. How many pets you have? Who are they? What are they? Tell us all about them. We love animals on
Oh
this
God.
program.
Currently, four cats, two dogs, and a pet python.
Okay, the dogs and the cats are allowed to be on screen, but not the python. Under zero circumstances are we gonna see pictures of the snake. I draw the line at things that don't have appendages.
Oh, but Vicky is so sweet.
No.
It's always funny because it's always a 50-50 when I mention that I have a pet ball python because half the people are very interested in her and then half the people get kind of freaked out. Although I have won some people over because when they meet her in person, they realize she's very cat-like and she loves people.
Okay, is she a free range snake?
No.
Okay, good. I very briefly dated somebody in my early 20s whose roommate
No,
had a
no,
free
no.
range,
She,
and
she has a tank, and the tank
yeah,
is
good.
her dining room, and
And it has a lid.
yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, I feel better now, but
And for some bizarre reason, the dogs are the python's best friend. The dogs love Vicky. I don't know why, but they do.
that's very, very strange. And I don't care how close a friend you and I become over the years, Ashley, I'm not visiting your house. Just putting
I,
that out there.
I promise if you do, she'll stay in her cage.
No, I can't even be in the same house. No, it's just not going to work. No, no, I don't go into the reptile at this house at the zoo. I don't look at photographs. I don't look at pictures on TV. I don't do any of that. No, no. We stopped watching Animal Planet because they kept popping up. But we're not here to talk about my fears and phobias. We're here to talk about the fears and phobias that you write into your books. And before we go much further, I need to make sure that all those readers out there in listener land understand that today's episode has a listener advisory for mature situations, strong language, and violence. So if you had little ears listening to the program today, you might want to preview this episode before they sit in on it. So back to our regularly scheduled conversation. Today, Ashley, you're going to read from Empty Cargo, which is a Renfield story. Tell me a little bit about the background and help me set up the story a little bit.
Okay. I originally wrote this as my idea as a short story for an online magazine. It did not stop at being a short story. My idea was instead of having Renfield be the lawyer that goes nuts in the original Dracula, to make him one of the sailors on the Demeter, partially because of my own experiences as a teenager on the Great Lakes.
Okay. Were those
However, uh,
positive or negative experiences?
however, as I was writing it, it just got longer and longer, and it was when I took up about half of my notebook that I realized I'm not writing a short story on
Aha.
myself.
That's when the muse takes over and says, I'm in charge now, and we're writing a longer piece.
That's basically what happened. I realized I had no more control over it. I did get a little bit angry with myself at the characterizations too, because I wanted Dracula to be the classic Bela Lugosi Dracula.
Yeah.
kind of happened, but a lot of his spoken lines in the book ended up being a little bit more of a stat from Anne Rice.
But that's an interesting mixture of Dracula. Yeah, that could be intriguing. So did this turn out to be a full-fledged novel or is it a
Yes,
novella?
it is a full-fledged novel.
Wow. Okay, so that's a really good example of a short story gone wild. So, tell me about the setup for the story. What's the basic premise for this novel?
Um, it basically answers the question that in kind almost like a parallel universe way, it answers the question of what happens to the Demeter, because if you read the book Dracula, it doesn't say much about the crew, the captain, or the ship itself. It just says that
Okay.
this boat crashed and now we have a vampire in England. This book kind of answers that question of what happened.
Excellent. It's a really great cover too. It's a really great cover. Okay. I am interested very much to hear you read a little bit of this. I understand you're going to read a little bit from chapter 4 today.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Ashley Grant, who's going to be reading from Empty Cargo. Please, when you are ready, take the microphone and read aloud.
Thank you. Chapter 4. Renfield lost himself chasing the perfect night watch he had at the helm. No wicked winds or cold rain pelted his skin, nor fog to block the path, just the calmer waves sending him forward. All the beauty in the light swirls of Istanbul beckoned him onward, pulling Renfield into a peaceful array. The cloud-covered sky of morning failed to register in his sight. He stood alone, not responding to anyone on board. Steering west and furthering the Demeter's unstoppable passage seemed to be his only goal. Boris tried to shake him from this haze spell, but failed. No matter how hard the captain yelled at him, or how rough Boris shook his shoulder, Renfield stood, his hands tightly gripping the wheel. Unable to remove him from the helm, the captain and second mate reluctantly left him where he was, content to enjoy the spare time they had to work on other needed jobs on the ship. To the surprise and confusion of the whole crew, Renfield stayed at the helm for an entire day and night. He awoke from his catatonic state with a jolt. Bodies rushing past him in the streaking light of daybreak broke him out of his mesmerized state. Everyone was alarmed. Renfield rubbed the stiffness from his hands as much as he could. An overcast sky, paired with the light drizzle, was swallowing the rays breaking through the cloud cover and hitting the sails. Dazed and dizzied, the deckhand looked around at the chaos from the shouting of the captain. If he had paid attention, Renfield might have noticed the canvas-wrapped body being carried by Brom and one of the newcomers from Turkey. It was an odd thought at the time, but from what little he could gaze of his new shipmate, the man was breathtaking. He didn't get a good glance through all the commotion. Renfield was horrible at names and didn't know his two newest shipmates. Had Count Dracula not been so forceful, it is possible Renfield wouldn't remember the noble's name either. All these tiny elements came together blending viciously, startling him at the helm into full consciousness, making whatever emergency had transpired that much more urgent to him, as he forced motion into his overworked muscles. What happened? Renfield asked. The panic on deck rose. The captain, Boris, everyone except Piotr were circling around one area behind him near the masts. Something must have gone wrong. Stepping closer to the circle, the crew was making Renfield try to break through and see for himself what the commotion was. What is the matter? After his question, at last he was acknowledged, but not answered. Strange looks passed over every man in the crew. The captain nodded to Boris, but no word was uttered yet. The unnatural silence fed into Renfield's fear. Boris stepped away from the ring, pulling Renfield along with him with a harsh tug on the deckhand's left elbow, leading Renfield away from everyone towards the bow. Boris blocked the deckhand's view of the circle, speaking in whispers. He tried to peer over Boris, but the man had a few inches to spare compared to Renfield's average height, with muscle included, and stopped his curious gaze. Did you notice anything strange last night? Anything at all? Renfield scoffed at the bizarre questions. unsure of his shipmate's intention. No, I don't remember anything. Nothing at all. Why are you acting so guarded towards me, Boris? Boris looked over Renfield's shoulder at the rest of the crew huddling around the port side of the deck. You're certain nothing happened? You were strange yesterday. Renfield shook his head, his senses rearing with panic and confusion at the second mate's reluctance. First mate was found dead in the hold, he was informed by Boris. The stirring emotions of the crew made sense to him now. Trying to search his own memories of what the captain shared of owning the ship for years, Renfield couldn't recall anyone dying in the hold before. That fact alone would set everyone on edge. How? Did he fall? Renfield inquired, trying in vain to bring sense to the turmoil. Boris didn't answer, leaving Renfield with even more questions. The honesty in the deckhand's voice had to be the deciding factor, giving the second mate no reason to hold the younger man any longer. He passed Boris' interrogation. The second mate let go of Renfield's arm, letting him join the rest of the crew, still standing around the deceased. Did he want to join everyone else? Would it be seen as disrespectful or weak if he didn't? His reputation on the ship could be at risk if Boris's behavior was an indication of what the crew was thinking. In slow steps, Renfield joined the group, gazing over the body. The captain hunched his tall body over the canvas covering the first mate. Removing his wool cap, his balding gray hair was visible for the whole crew. A lifetime at sea had left him with a well-muscled back, but one would not have believed it if they had noticed the man's beer gut. Stroking his thin mustache with his right hand, many speculated on board that the years on the ship had stolen any tolerance the captain might have had in his younger years. It was easy to tell that the many years at sea had given his arms and face a slightly darker tan than the rest of his body, which would have been a very pale white if not for his career. Renfield thought of him as an aging portly tyrant. How he wished he could avoid the man, but on such a small schooner, where would Renfield hide? The body appears unharmed, the captain grunted. Renfield knew his curious nature was getting the better of him. He pulled back the canvas covering the first mate. He remembered the constable in his hometown would look for obvious injuries on bodies, so he made a poor attempt to copy the actions. None of his shipmates moved to stop him, not even the captain. Renfield couldn't blame them. The Demeter wasn't built to ferry people. How much would all of them combined be able to recognize a cause of death, himself included? The body was cool to the touch, yet dry. Renfield knew enough to tell the first mate had passed some time in the night. The eyes of the dead man had already turned a disturbing tint of blue, not held by the living. Taut, wrinkled skin, aged by salt water and the sun, was beginning to harden. Renfield didn't know where in Russia the first mate had come from. In a selfish half-second of ignorance, Renfield wondered how difficult his job would become now that one of the crew who spoke English was dead. With his futile inspection complete, Renfield gripped the canvas to place it over the body once more. The back of his hand brushed over the first mate's neck. For a second, Renfield believed he felt holes puncturing the skin. Standing, he shook his head, not finding anything out of place. He didn't stay for the captain's prayers over the body, or Boris's remarks on the dead man's career. What use would it be for him to watch the body be thrown overboard into the ocean? Renfield sneaked down to his hammock, the unplanned labor intensifying his exhaustion. His back insisted on competing with his legs in a sadistic game over which part on Renfield's body had more stiffness. He could only stretch his body so far in the tight space that comprised the crew quarter. There was nothing I could do, he whispered. Renfield's eyes closed just as his body found the swaying hammock. His left leg remained off the side of the rough line's edge. Most days he would have avoided the stiff rope, but Renfield was far too drained to care at that moment. His dream was far from easy. Sweat dripped down his brow from the intense ambience. Again and again the waves rose, threatening to sweep Renfield into the sea. The wheel spun out of his hands, alarming him for the safety of not only his life, but the storm also wanted to sink the ship, the soaked wood ripping flesh off his palms as it pleased. A hot, sticky mess of his blood made it impossible for him to get a firm grasp on the handles. Throwing his body weight into the turn, Renfield fought to maintain control of the Demeter, thrashing haphazardly on the water. The lantern leapt off its hook, summoned by the force of the gale, landing behind Renfield. The hot metal missed contact with his face only by luck. Harsh fumes wafting from the kerosene quickly summoned a blaze on deck. On the bow, Renfield saw the shadowed figure of another. Squinting, the deckhand tried to focus on the other man, clinging to the railing. With their head tilted down, it was hard for him to make out any details. He reached for the lantern, but it swayed out of Renfield's grasp, tilting towards the bow. My lord? The phrase seemed wrong to Renfield when he noticed the new wanderer on deck. Count? Have you come to speak to me again tonight? He rephrased the question, hoping to get a response from the other person. The winds picked up force. The gale around him was glowing, even more volatile. Renfield was forced to let go of the helm in the backlash of a surge engulfing the wheel. His body violently flew into the lines. He felt the harsh kiss of flames and smoke stroke against his skin as he was tossed into the portside rigging. Slow steps came towards him, unbothered by the harsh conditions. Sorry, I have 2 pages stuck together. His body shook, his arms trapped in place against them. He pulled, but found his struggle futile. The shadow came closer. Whoever it was had louder, more determined footsteps, moving without the grace and speed of his nocturnal noble companion. The crew, the ship. How much are you willing to give to Count Dracula? The voice asked. The accent was familiar. Renfield had heard similar Russian accents on the Demeter for months. Show yourself. I haven't the time for aimless shit, he growled at the other man who had yet to reveal themselves. Into the fire's glow stepped the first mate, his eyes still haunted by the blue hue of death. Words failed on Renfield's lips. The first mate placed both of his hands on the grate of the hold. His fingers curled with a sickening crack at every knuckle. In life, the first mate had been decently handsome, enough to gain the attention of many women at every dock. In death, he was gruesome. Renfield kept what little distance he could from the spirit's distorted face. Every vein that would not be visible on a living individual shone with matching blue tones to the man's eyes. Even his hair dripped down in patches, waterlogged from the funeral the captain had given him earlier that same day. Renfield stared in hard fascination and confusion as to why the ghost was angry at him when he had nothing to do with the man's current state. You sold me to him. Will you sell the entire crew to your precious Count Dracula as well? I had nothing to do with your death. I was at the helm, Renfield protested, shielding his face with his arms. Was there nothing he could do to appease this phantom? How could he respond in a way that would contradict what the first mate's ghost was saying? Yes, but who put you there? The phantom inquired. Who put him there? What a ridiculous question. The captain had ordered Renfield to stand the night watch. What else would he have been on the Demeter? Who kept you at the helm? The first man reiterated. I've worked night watch since the first day I've been aboard this accursed lumber heap, Renfield replied, confusion and anger swelling from the first man's barrage of questions. You stayed at the helm for an entire day. Renfield, at his command you chased the sunset. Dracula has charmed his way straight into your mind, a talent no man can rightfully do. The first man's grave omen couldn't reach into Renfield's heart. You're a fool if you think you won't fall with the rest of us. Renfield, you will suffer the most, the first mate warned.
Okay, and so the stage is set for horrific things to come. Holy moly. So where did you get the idea to write? I mean, I know it started as a short story, but what made you decide that you were going to write about this missing ship? Where did you get that idea from?
Um, I think part of it is, like I said, from the tall ship that I was on, as a teenager. The idea just kind of sprang. And as I wrote, um, more and more of what I was feeling at the time, the desperation just came out. The prompt for the magazine was to do a short story, was for different short stories about Renfield. And that's when I thought about it, and I realized, like I said, as I was writing this, like, oh, well, what if I put Renfield on the Demeter and I just put him on a ship because I had experience with ships. And as
So
I was
was your
writing it,
experience with ships positive or negative?
negative,
Okay
very
then.
negative.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Um, so who would you say is the unusual character in this book? Is it a side character? Is it a primary character? who would be the one that you think is going to be most surprising to your readers?
Probably one of the side characters. He shows up multiple times. His name is Piotr. He was mentioned in that chapter. Piotr is the nephew of the captain and is the ship's cabin boy.
Okay. And what makes him so surprising?
He's very innocent. He's just like a normal 14-year-old, and he unfortunately does not survive the, the tale. His death is actually extremely shocking, and that is the scene where Renfield finally puts two and two together because, as you can guess from that chapter, Renfield's not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Well, yeah, but we have to have character arcs that grow with the story, right? Or
Yeah.
in some cases fall away as the story progresses. What was
Yeah.
your favorite part of writing this book? I mean, I know that you didn't have a great experience being on a ship, but what was a very positive experience for you about writing this book?
I think the character of Dracula was probably my favorite part of this book, and just the many lines that I gave him. Like the interaction between him and Renfield, the back and forth to me was hilarious. Although, as unintentional as it was, like when I was going back and reading it the second time for the second draft, I'm like, why is he so sassy? Wait, I wanted Bela Lugosi. Why is Dracula being this sassy? And then I finally put two and two together and I realized, oh crap, I'm writing Lestat.
Too much Anne Rice in your life, right?
Pretty much so.
But we all have really great literary influences, and Anne Rice is not a bad influence to have.
It's like if Bela Lugosi and Tom Cruise have been blended together into one vampire, that would be the Dracula in this book.
That's not necessarily a bad combination. So, do you see another story growing out of this, or is this defiantly a standalone?
This wouldn't I've thought about not doing a direct sequel to this, possibly a companion to this for many years. I have not started on that. Only because this story is kind of open and shut.
Okay.
But both the prologue and the epilogue take place in the asylum that Renfield was in.
Oh, well, there's plenty of material there.
So my kind of idea that's floated around in the back of my head, as maybe being in the same universe, but I've never gotten around to it, is not having a book surrounded by Renfield, but having a book surrounded by Dr. Stewart, his psychiatrist, who follows him after he escapes the asylum. It's like, you're fucking nuts. This is fucking crazy. This is not, holy shit, there's a vampire.
That could be fun. That could be really entertaining. And then, depending on how much humor you interject in it, it could be really different piece.
I mean, that's been the idea that's kind of floated around in my head. It's just this like whole thing of like, oh, no, you're completely insane. What is that?
Yeah,
That's Dracula.
yeah,
What?
absolutely. That
You
could be super
got me.
fun. I mean, it worked for the Terminator franchise, right? The first Terminator movie that came out, the psychiatrist was proven wrong, much to every moviegoer's delight. So it could work. It could. Awesome.
It's an idea that's floated around in my head. Whether or not it actually gets published, whether or not I actually sit down and write it sometime is a different
Well,
story.
who knows? You might sit down and just write a quick treatment or a quick short story on it, and then it could evolve from there. Who knows?
But yes, the psychiatrist does show up like three times in the book, both in the very beginning and at the very end of the book. So that was the idea that's kind of juggled in my head for a few years, for
I
like
think
two,
it
three
could be
years
fun.
now. It's
Yeah.
been the psychiatrist following Renfield and find out the hard way Renfield was not lying.
No, I think it could be a fun idea to play with. I could see definite storylines coming out of that. Absolutely. I'm so glad you came back on the program. I hope you'll come and visit us again and read to me again. I love it when you read out loud.
You. Um, I
So,
definitely will, hopefully, once my sequel to If the King Falls is finally over.
yeah, absolutely. Definitely come on back and share your work with us anytime. You're always welcome.
So thank you for having me. Have a good night.
You too.